Okay, very good. Thank you, Michael.
This meeting is being recorded.
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure who that was. Okay, Scott, do you need us to show the presentation, or do you have that? Okay, very good.
I'm doing that now. I thought I had done it, and turns out I had not. So I was ready to go without presenting it. So now here we go. Thank you very much, Michael. We'll get started now with the results of our independent safety culture assessment for the Martinez Refining Company, PBF Energy. I think most of you have already been introduced to us, so just maybe to do a high-level introduction. So my name is Scott Berger. I'll also be presenting with my colleague Ken Stevick. He'll come in about the second half of the presentation. We're both chemical engineers. We've both been working in the field of process safety for pretty close to 25 years. And a lot of that focus has been on helping leaders of our companies and of our clients in developing really strong process safety cultures. So this is a really interesting project for us, and we're glad that you all selected us to work on it with you. I think you all know the reason this project was established was part of a number of things done by the MRC Oversight Committee as a result of the spent catalyst dust release November 24th, 2022. This culture study was one of the things that the Oversight Committee wished to have done. And so we were contracted to perform that work. Just give you a quick overview of the findings that we have from our study. First of all, we found finding related to the way that MRC conducts incident investigations. In particular, we found that the investigations didn't get to root causes, and therefore were not really well designed for preventing future incidents. And this is something that was pretty important. We also found that there were, I guess the way MRC handled procedure deviations was not quite what we had in mind, what we thought would be good for a strong culture. Modes of control, and we'll talk about what that means a little bit later on, was a key factor, but other changes to procedures or another aspect. We found that although there were some really good asset integrity issues within, or ways of managing asset integrity at MRC, there were other parts of the program that were not as robust, and so we had recommendation about upgrading those other aspects of asset integrity. And we found another finding related to dealing with the things that were found in audits in general, and mostly having to do with timing. And again, we'll talk about all these things in greater detail as we move on. Some positive findings that we had. We found that, I think maybe at a high level summary, that MRC has the bones of bones to create a really strong process safety culture. And these include a focus on meeting risk criteria, their Goal Zero initiative to try to drive the incident rate to zero, the engagement processes that the refinery leadership have implemented. We found that they had a very strong program for managing asset integrity related to pressurized equipment and interlocks. So again, going back to that previous slide, building similar programs for other mechanical equipment is part of that, will be part of our recommendation. A very strong emergency response and training program, a good format for operating procedures, and a very professional shift turnover process. And again, we'll get into more of these in more detail as we go on. So in terms of the overall presentation, we're going to talk about the core principles that we implemented as part of this project, summarize our objectives and approach, present our review of MRC's internal culture survey. We'll then talk about our assessment of MRC's process safety management systems and how their leadership drives those systems, and conclude with our recommendations. The core principle that we have embodied in this work is that you get the culture that the leadership drives in any facility. So, to the degree that the management systems are well defined and the leadership are driving the execution in a professional manner, that's going to be the culture that you'll get. So it has to do with the quality and also with the execution. And I do want to also point out that we're focusing here on process safety. I know it's called a safety culture assessment, but the incident that we're dealing with, the catalyst release incident, was a process safety incident. And so that is the focus of our work. So maybe to illustrate a little bit more about the concept that we're underpinning our work with, you can look at this graph or this chart on the right-hand side of the slide. And so if we have a strong management system or strong management system element, and the leadership is driving it in a strong manner, we'll have a strong culture. If on the other hand, we could have a very, very good document, but if management isn't driving it, we'll have a paper-based system. It'll look good on paper, but it won't be good in reality. And conversely, if leaders are putting a lot of focus on getting things done, but the actual system isn't defined very well, then we'll have unreliable results. And so again, what we're trying to do is to move toward that upper right-hand corner, both in terms of execution and in terms of the quality of the management system. So with that in mind, we spent the bulk of our work assessing MRC's process safety management systems for their content and their quality, and then how MRC's leadership ensures the reliable execution of those management system elements. And then we, of course, compared and contrasted that with the culture survey that was put together by MRC as part of their requirements under the various applicable regulations. And we'll talk about that also in just a bit. Our approach, again, was to analyze that survey that was actually conducted between November 22nd and November of 2022 and March of 2023. The results were then summarized and published in April of 2023. We reviewed the management system documents provided by MRC along with their key reports and records and metrics, and we interviewed their personnel to come up with basically our assessment of the management system and how that drove the culture. So as I mentioned, the MRC survey was conducted according to Contra Costa's Industrial Safety Ordinance, ISO, the Cal-ARP regulation, and also the Cal-OSHA PSM regulation for refineries that requires the culture surveys to be performed every 5 years. I think MRC actually does them a little bit more frequently than every 5 years. This particular survey that was done in the 2022-2023 period was overseen by both staff and union representation. There were 62 questions in all that the participants were to rank between 1 and 10, with 1 being the lowest score and 10 being the highest score. Now, what we did was we looked at the results of this survey, focusing on areas where there was evidence that culture was being driven to get good results. And so to do this, we looked only at the survey results with a score of 7 out of 10 or better. We did not include in our analysis the mediocre scores, which would be 4 to 6, or the low scores, or blank. So basically, we wanted to know what was positive, what was working. And you'll see how this works on the next slide. So what we did is we summed all of the good answers, all the 7 or greater scores, to get a total good culture score, I'll call it. Now, there was 485 respondents, and with a maximum of 10 points each, the maximum score for any given question would have been 4,850. So you can see on this chart that there were some questions that were pretty darn close to that maximum score of 4,188.50. And what we did was we ranked from highest score to lowest score on this chart. Now the numbers at the bottom of the slide represent the question numbers, and because of this presentation, we're just going to highlight in general terms the findings, but in our report we do indicate what each of these question numbers we're talking about. So the questions that were shown in orange bars, those obviously are the stronger areas as identified in the culture survey. And in the red sort of diagonally striped bars would be the weaker areas, the ones with less positive scoring. I also want to highlight in the middle here of the graph, there's 2 solid black bars that have to do with the perception of workers, that whether or not they work in a safe workplace or a safe refinery. And I'm sure it's pretty clear to all of us here that what I think we would all like to see is to see those 2 bars shifting quite a bit over toward the left, where people do feel like they are working in a safe refinery. Now, this is really what I would call a lagging indicator. And the rest of the survey questions were more what I would call leading indicators, the ones that if we can improve on those culture areas, we should see the results in the lagging area, the questions about how people feel about working in the refinery. Well, that would make them shift to the left if we can improve in those other areas, those red striped areas, and also to some degree the green striped areas. And let's talk about each of these in turn. I do want to mention before we get into details that there was something that we saw in looking at the culture survey that jumped out at us, and that had to do with 2 things. One was the acquisition of the refinery by PBF and the transfer of ownership from Shell to PBF, which occurred in February of 2020, which was followed closely by all of the COVID restrictions that were implemented in March 2020. And typically when you have an acquisition or change of ownership, there's all kinds of things that happen. The senior leadership of the refinery becomes very occupied in dealing with the integration efforts of the new owner. We have people who are getting close to retirement who say, I really don't want to deal with working for a new owner, and they decide to take early retirement. And similarly, people who are thinking about changing positions might take this as an opportunity. And so we did, do see that there was a number of some good employee turnover that was occurring as a result of all this. Similarly, we because of the COVID pandemic, that was also a reason for many people to take early retirement and to look for different kinds of jobs. Perhaps they could work more remotely. And so again, that also lends to turnover. And then the COVID restrictions themselves made it difficult for there to be face-to-face interactions between leadership and workers, and between workers and other workers. And so there were a number of questions that we identified on the survey that were more likely than not affected by this particular situation. And when we saw those questions, we essentially set those aside. We said that, you know, if we do, we can spend a lot of time looking at it, but really what we need to do instead is recommend that those particular questions be reevaluated down the road at an appropriate time, and that time we identified would be after the recommendations from this culture survey have been implemented. And so we'll talk about that also a little bit later in the evening. So now let's talk about relative strengths. Well, they were identified through the culture survey, and we found that between whether it was management or whether it was workers themselves, people felt that they were taking a personal responsibility and accountability for process safety in the facility. We also felt that, we also saw that workers felt that their management was reflecting the safety values that they espouse in terms of this Goal Zero program. There was, you know, unanimity between workers and management on this. We also learned that workers and leaders felt that there was a good reporting of incidents and near misses. Nothing was being swept under the carpet, and that workers felt comfortable using stop work authority. And I'll mention this as a strength, but we'll also see this show up in an improvement opportunity a little bit later. So there's a sort of a fine line here that we need to distinguish. There was also a couple of questions that were not related to process safety. So again, those were set aside as not related to process safety culture. Now let's look at these highest leverage opportunities, the ones that are over on the right-hand side of this graph with the lower scores. So we saw comments, responses to questions related to excessive pressure to get the job done, to gaps in preventive maintenance, to gaps in learning from incident investigation. So you can see those sound a little bit like some of the things that that showed up in our high-level summary at the beginning. There were some questions related to COVID-19, and also another question that was not linked to process safety. In this green bar, you can see that that's a kind of a plateau, and the scores there are not really that much higher than the I guess the highest score in that red category. So we thought that it was worth focusing on these as well. Again, pressure to take shortcuts, maybe a lack of knowledge or a gap in knowledge on the actions to take in emergency, and we suspect this had something to do with the number of the employee turnover, new employees coming in. We saw negative consequences after using stop work authority. So people were comfortable using it, but then experienced negative consequences. And then training after changes made. And there was a number of responses also here, likely influenced by COVID-19 that we set aside. So kind of, you roll those all together, what we see are three general categories. One is learning from incident investigations and near-miss investigations. Things that are related to deviating for procedures, shortcuts, and the use of stop work authority, and gaps in preventive maintenance. So then this then takes us to our assessment of the management system, our management system review, and how that ties back to culture. And so at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ken. And Ken, I can keep advancing the slides as you speak.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Scott. So as Scott said, the culture that we really want, we define or document within our management system. And our actual culture that we get really depends on how well we define that management system and how well we're executing it and how well it's being driven by leadership. Now, there is a very much a recognized process safety management system, and it's the Center for Chemical Process Safety's risk-based process safety. There's 20 management system elements to that. Many of these elements are in common with ISO, Cal-OSHA, and Cal-ARP requirements. But there's also a series of those that are really deal with culture and performance. And those are the things in gray. So compliance with recognized and generally accepted good engineering practice standards, competency of all people from the leadership on down in process safety, conduct of operations, which includes making sure we're doing the things that we espouse to do in our management system. For example, following procedures. Our procedures are up to date and accurate, and we follow them. And then the last one that is also in there is management review and continuous improvement. When you look at all of these ISO standards, they're all set up around a plan, do, check, act process with the idea that we want to drive continuous improvement in the management system. And the intent of this management system is very simple. It's that one, we don't have incidents or we eliminate incidents, and two, we have enough and robust enough protection layers consistent with our risk criteria for the different scenarios that can happen. So, next slide, please. So Scott did start off by saying that there was a lot of very positive things or aspects of the refineries management system. And that first one was focused on meeting the risk criteria. And as I just said, the intent of the management system is to really make sure that we have the proper number and robustness of our protection layers consistent with our risk criteria. And in this case, the refinery does, and they're very aggressive when they do process hazard assessments and they find that they need more protection layers. They're very aggressive in promptly closing those recommendations and elevating their layers of protection. The second one is their Goal Zero initiative. This is really a underpinning process for everything they're doing, and it focuses on all of EH&S as well as process safety, and that really lays a great foundation. And that's something that's new being brought in with the acquisition, and I think that's one of the things that's really going to help it when they redo their cultural survey later on. Their continuous focus on that. As we talked about a little bit earlier, all ISO management systems are set up around a plan, do, check, act process. They all end with management reviews and continuous improvement. And the refinery leadership team is living this. They have a regular cadence of reviews of everything around process safety and are very aggressive on managing those issues that they have identified. One great example is their pressure equipment integrity and their interlock integrity program. I think you could arguably say those are the best we've ever seen. They're best in class in industry. And in fact, this refinery has contributed to some of these standards that industry has for when they learn things, how do they leverage that to other companies. As Scott also mentioned, they have a very strong emergency response program and procedures format and a very professional shift turnover process. So next slide, please, Scott. So we did, we covered the strong items first, but there are some improvement areas. And Scott talked a little bit about the incident investigation process is not designed to prevent future incidents. And they're really not getting to the root causes. And what we mean by that is identifying those management system failures that allowed the protection layer to fail. By definition, if an incident happens, every preventive protection layer failed. And so when you're doing an investigation, you have to make sure you get to the management system failure that allowed that protection layer to fail, because if you don't fix that management system, the same type of protection layer could fail on a different piece of equipment. So, we got to make sure that we're going beyond human errors and mechanical failures and really driving down to those system failures. Then, of course, once you do that, you got to train people on that process and begin using it and perform what we would call a repetitive incident analysis on management system failures whenever a management system failure happens, and make sure we're correcting it at the right level within the facility. Is this something that is just at one of the plants, or is this across the whole facility or the technology, or is this a corporate or enterprise type issue? And you'll see some timing in here for doing these actions, and the refinery agrees in principle with this recommendation, but is going to be reviewing a little bit more time to evaluate the timing. So we're recommending to complete the first two items by August of this year, which is pretty aggressive, and then do the retroactive analysis by August 31st of next year, and then make it a permanent part of the process going forward. Next slide, please. The second opportunity really revolved around unreviewed procedure deviations, and specifically when you think about process control with computers, there is something called mode of control, whether we run something in automatic where the process computer is measuring a variable and then adjusting an output to bring that variable within a certain range of what we've defined as a safe operating limit. And in this particular case, we found that they really don't have a protocol or process for managing process control modes, and when we can be outside of automatic or cascade, and what are the conditions for that, the amount of timing, or the situations where that's acceptable. And if we exceed those types of limits, then doing some sort of professional review to say, what's the risk? What should we be monitoring going forward? What's our contingency plan? And how do we make sure we're getting this back into automatic control? A computer can look at something hundreds of times of a second, where it's very easy for someone running something in manual to be distracted by any number of things. So the recommendation really, or the opportunity really, revolves around really setting a management system element protocol around these deviations and procedures, including modes of control for process control. And, the recommendation is to complete the development and roll out of this process by the end of this year, and they agree with that recommendation and timing. Okay, the third is to look at other areas of asset integrity. They have a very strong best-in-class program for pressure equipment, things like pressure vessels, storage tanks, relief devices, piping, and also for their interlocks that will take the process to a low energy state. And that's something that's part of the management leadership reviews cadence on a regular basis, and they make sure that those things are being done. Their same opportunity exists for some other areas of asset integrity, like rotating equipment or electrical processes, where they could use that same concept and level of rigor to make sure that those systems stay in really good shape. And again, there was a agreement on this and a goal to get that done by the end of this year. This one, we noticed on some of the previous audits that were done, there were some procedural issues that we thought were material. In other words, that needed to be corrected right away. By legal requirements, there's an allowance for how much time you have to do those. But when you think of a strong process safety culture, anytime you find a material deviation of procedure, you want to correct that before the next use of that procedure. So that's an opportunity to strengthen that management system element around procedures and really move it to a much stronger state where we're not tolerating issues that we know that need to be fixed. And so, we recommended a change in their policy by July 31st, 2024, and to resolve any open items by August. and thereafter resolve all such items immediately. And we're not talking about grammar errors. We're talking about, something that was really material, that something has to be done in a certain way. And the refinery also agrees with that recommendation and timing. And then the last one was really looking at conducting the next cultural survey ahead of schedule. Again, we believe that they're likely some of the responses were really dictated by the situation and the atmosphere created around COVID-19 and the working conditions we had, and with some of the things that the refinery is doing with Goal Zero and their other strong management system elements, we think you'd probably have a much different response on that survey. And so the recommendation is to really do that on a more sooner rather than later, just to bear out that the direction we're headed is proper. And they agree with that recommendation and timing.
So that concludes our presentation, and we'll turn it back over to Michael. I will, before doing that, just mention that a part of our proposal was that when we came up with recommendations, that we would review specifically the recommendation and the timing with MRC, because we wanted to make sure that when we talked about something that needed to be done, that we had it placed in the right part of their management system, and also and consistent with the timing that they could actually achieve based on other kinds of things that they were doing. And so, for example, redoing the survey, the culture survey in September of 2025, one of the factors there was that MRC will be doing a turnaround in the summer of 2025. And so having the survey any sooner might have put them in a situation where they had too many things going on at the same time. So, we were just trying to make our recommendations, specific, but also, achievable, and time, but also having a time component. So I think that's it for us. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the presentation. If you want to take down the presentation, I could put up the agenda. So now we were going to have comments from the Oversight Committee members. I know Tony is having internet problems, so he's not with us at the moment. But go ahead. So it looks like first I see is Nick. Wait, just before you go, Nick, Nicole, are you ready?
Well, actually, I just wanted, before you dove into the Oversight Committee comments, can you please go over what the next steps are in the whole entire process for this draft safety culture report for any new members of the public who might be joining us today?
Sure. Sorry about that. So after the presentation, the process is next is we go through the Oversight Committee comments. So they're the ones that, if they have any things they want to modify in the actual report that was provided to them, they mention those comments here verbally, or they could also do it in writing to Scott and Keenan. And then after those comments have been addressed, then we're going to go open up to public comments for this session. And then eventually the draft report has already been posted online at the MRC's website on our hazmat web directory. And then after the comments are here from this session, we'll collect those and we'll have responses to those. And eventually we'll have to schedule a public meeting. There is no date yet for when that public meeting will actually take place. We have to still work on doing that. And once we do have some potential dates, we'll actually send those out so everybody can be aware of those. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give Nick the opportunity to speak, and I will have Nicole actually be the host.
Hey, Mike, can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Nick.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I've got half a dozen comments I just want to walk through really quickly. First of all, I don't feel that sharing the findings with the company before sharing with the Oversight Committee is along the lines of what we're trying to accomplish here. I feel like the findings should have been shared with the Oversight Committee ahead of time. I just feel like the level of transparency and stuff like that, what got worked out with deadlines and agreement and stuff like that, but what are we missing? Did anything fall off in that regard? Second, in the report that, and thanks for Scott mentioning this, there's a lot of stuff that was found in the culture survey that was kind of written off due to the sale from Shell to PBF and COVID at the same time. And I mean, just to sum through a few of those: lack of knowledge of where to find process safety information, process safety not given sufficient priority in decision making, incident reporting system doesn't provide details quickly enough to prevent future incidents. I mean, these are serious findings that are getting written off as COVID/sale issues. I appreciate what Scott mentioned about reevaluating those in the future, but I believe that those could directly link to more incidents of a similar nature, and that they need to be addressed much sooner than that and should be considered findings with immediate recommendations. I'd like to find out that, it is something related to something else and we've already taken care of it. But I think at this point, we can't just go off of a belief that that's true and maybe check in another year after another turnaround. I think we need to get started on working on all of those right now. So there's a significant amount of findings that are written off due to COVID in the sale, and I believe that those are real findings and need real recommendations. My third point, stop work authority on page 10. Scott mentions that there's some issues with stop work authority at the plant, possibly related to the narrow California regulatory definition, and that is different than process safety professionals. I'd really like an elaboration on that, to see if we're missing something or over including something or overcomplicating the process, because it is an integral process for safety, especially within a refinery, to be able to identify something that's incorrect and to be able to speak to that and stop something that's happening, and all the uncomfortable and pressure and retaliation stuff that goes along with that. That's a really big deal. And to just kind of, mention that, hey, the definition might be off a little bit and keep going. If there's more there, I'd really want to hear what more is. And again, a lot of the stop work authority stuff was written off as COVID and the sale. And again, that's huge. That's something that's happening right now that I know is wrong, and I'm not able to speak up. Whether I have the skill to identify it or the knowledge to mention that, but do I have the authority to actually speak up and put a stop to something that I know is wrong, is a really big deal for every worker in the refinery. Next, number 4. So in the report, there's a few mentions of reduction of risk. It starts off with, generally acceptable risk levels. And then on page 7, it mentions, the goal should be 0 process safety incidents. On page 8, there's risk targets that are set by leadership. And on page 10, there's this corporate risk criteria. Did Scott get into corporate risk criteria? Is the corporate risk criteria accurate? Is the risk target set by leadership accurate and acceptable? If it's too low or high, meaning there's too much risk going on in the plant, that's something that needs to be identified right there. Like the 4-square graph that you showed, with the red, yellow, and green. Just having a good process at the plant, but if you're following a weak program, then you're kind of set up for failure anyway. So were you able to review the corporate risk criteria and the risk targets that were set by leadership? Not just are they setting targets, but are they real targets that are going to eventually lead to 0 process safety incidents? So I feel like the report was lacking maybe in a sense there. Also, the page 11 and 12 talked about a notable number of workers that felt otherwise. And this is regard to the safety questions that were mentioned, the two that were highlighted in black on the graph in the presentation. A notable amount of workers not feeling safe is a huge red flag. When you have an incident like what happened at Marathon last November with an employee being burned over 90% of his body, there was a lot of red flags and a lot of people feeling unsafe for a long time. And to just kind of breeze over that as a lagging indicator, again, who's going to know what's going on in the plant better than the workers? You know, if you're unsafe, who's going to get hurt? It's the workers right there on the front lines that are gonna know exactly how safe they are and be able to speak to that. And when they do speak to that, we have to listen so that we're not acting surprised when something like this happens. So please don't overlook the fact that a notable amount of workers felt unsafe. Yeah, and then you know, one comment that I do want to make, I really respect the findings that are shared. Again, I don't agree with sharing them with the company first and working out, you know, what they're going to do in the timelines, but I really do agree with all the recommendations and the timelines that they do have in this report. I just am concerned that a lot of these findings that are italicized and written off as COVID findings or SAIL findings are just as important as the other ones, and we need to handle those as well. So thanks for pointing out the strengths of the site. I'd like to cheerlead the site for being strong in those areas, but I'm also skeptical that those might be inherited from Shell, and they're still strong at this point, but are they degrading? I wish I could say that I believe that it's PBF taking the reins and keeping that process going, but I believe that you know, some of this stuff has fallen off and led to this catalyst incident. And I'd like to verify that, you know, these other processes actually are strong and continuing to improve, not just leftovers from an era where Shell was there. So I like the report. Again, I'm just nervous that stuff has fallen off with regards to sharing it with the company and all that. Also, and a question for the county, is Scott going to be around to verify that these recommendation actions are closed? Again, being the report and recommendation maker and even working out timelines and stuff like that, is it going to be the county that verifies action item closure, or will Scott still be available for that? That's all I got. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. Before we go forward, I just wanted to mention that, Nicole, if you wanted to talk, you can. But one thing just to mention to everybody is that Scott Berger has a commitment, so he only has a few more minutes on this call, and then he has to leave. I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware of that. But we will have all the comments provided to Scott and Keenan to make sure everybody hears, they hear everybody's comments. So just to be clear. Anybody else in the Oversight Committee have any comments or questions? Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that actually, directly, Nick, to your question, did anything fall off the list in terms of recommendations? The answer to that is no. So we did appreciate the opportunity to have conversations with Ken and Scott directly about what they meant in the formulation, the language around the recommendations, as well as some of the content. And so we did arrive at general agreement on those recommendations. There are none beyond those that were dismissed. I think you're going to see that the nature of our comments is going to be a lot of the text in the report maybe isn't as advanced as the conversations that we did have about the recommendations. So there's some follow-on where we'll want to make the other sections of the report consistent with the recommendations. But yeah, in general, the conversations that we had with Kenan and Scott were important to have and valuable, and did not compromise the integrity of the recommendations.
Ken, do you have comments on the safety culture presentation or report that you'd like to share with Scott?
I'm sorry, Nicole, who was that for?
That was for you. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to confirm. Do you have comments for Scott or Kenan on their presentation or the report?
The comments that we have regarding the report, we have sent to you, and we're assuming that you're going to pass on to them.
They will be passed on, and I do appreciate you wanting to address this, but the purpose here is for Scott and Kenan to hear the comments from the Oversight Committee. So I just wanted to kind of intervene there, and also to reassure Nick that, Nick, we have heard your comments, and the county, in concert with Scott and Kenan, will make sure that we address the concerns that you brought up in the response to our comments.
Yep, so the nature of my comments on the recommendations would have been made anyway. That is our response to that part of their presentation.
Okay, understood. Thank you,
Okay.
Ken. I did see a couple of other hands that were raised. I don't know if Deirdre or anyone else wanted to comment, but Scott and Kenan have 8 minutes left. So if you'd like to speak, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Scott because I do see his hand is raised.
Yeah, I also wanted to point out regarding that first comment of Nick's, that when we put in our proposal for doing this work, our scope of work, we did include in that scope that we were going to be talking to MRC with our recommendations to sort of right size and make sure that we got the right wording. We weren't going to give up on anything unless we had evidence to say that we were wrong, but we didn't. But we did want to make sure that we didn't get into a situation where we were saying one thing and MRC was disagreeing because they didn't understand what we were saying. So that's why we had the conversation, and I think it was a good thing for us to do.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, I'm going to do a last call for any comments from members of the Oversight Committee. Just as a reminder too, for those of you who are in the audience, you will have an opportunity at the end of this meeting to have a 2-minute public comment period. Okay, I see Ben's hand is raised, so I'll turn it over to Ben now.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear.
Hey, I'm sorry, I had some connection problems. I just want to know how come only the 7 survey scores were analyzed? How come not the entire survey results? And if I missed that explanation, I'm sorry.
Okay. So what we were trying to do, our whole philosophy is based on, leadership driving performance and based on, sound systems that are well defined and measured and tracked and so with the appropriate tools. And so, our focus was on getting, really understanding which parts of the survey, which questions were giving, really strong answers. And when in the report, we actually show a situation, an example situation, hypothetical, I guess, where in one case you had sort of consistent, scores of, let's say, 8, and another where the answers were divided between 10s and 6s. And they both give you the same total score if you include every aspect of every response to the question. But when you look, but in reality, a company or a facility where you have a consistent high response all across the site from all the different work areas, that's going to be a better situation than one where there's some parts that where you have very strong scores and some which are not so strong. And so that's what we were trying to do, is to take out that question of basically tease that out, the variability, to say, here's where we know we have strong performance, and if we don't have strong performance, then the performance is not strong. So I hope that helps.
It does. And then I'm curious, and maybe this, Nicole, this was something that's covered when my connection faded out, but will all these results then be made public?
Yes, so this draft report is already posted online, so that members of the public would be able to see it before the meeting. But right now it is only Oversight Committee comments that we will be addressing. And then we will have, just like we did with the incident investigation report, a 45-day public comment period where, again, not only the draft report, but all of the responses from either County Health or Scott Berger and Kennan Stevic will be incorporated into that report and then posted online so that the public may comment on it before we have a final report. And Scott, we are able to get a copy of your presentation to post online as well, correct? You're on mute, Scott.
I made a couple of tweaks since the version I sent you, so I'll send you what was used tonight. I'll get that over to you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And thank you, Ben. Okay, we have time for one last comment from the Oversight Committee if anyone wishes to make a comment on the report. Otherwise, I will move on to the next item on our agenda. Okay, I am not seeing any hands raised from members of our Oversight Committee. So I will move on to the next item of our agenda. And thank you, everybody. The agenda was done out of order to accommodate Scott's availability. So we're going to talk now about a status update on the incident investigation report. The last time that we met, in March, we had not at that time opened our public comment period. Since then, we have opened the 45-day public comment period that was opened in April to have the incident investigation report be available to members of the public to review and comment on. On April 11th, we had a public meeting. The original date for public comment to end was May 20th, but I do want to bring an issue to the Oversight Committee's attention, and I have checked to verify that we have a majority of our Oversight Committee members on here. I would like to bring forward a vote. So let me give a little bit of background information on this. At the April 11th meeting, when we were talking about our incident investigation report, there was a number of comments that came to us from the community regarding questions related to the stripper slide valve, which is one of the components of the catalyst unit. A lot of questions were related to the maintenance of this valve, the condition of the valve, the time that will be passing before its next inspection, and overall, comparisons to what is different in this situation versus, other incidents that have involved fluid catalytic crackers and stripper slide valves. As you all know, as we have been going through these evaluations that we have done, the county takes, all of the comments we hear from the community very seriously, and we make adjustments as necessary. When those comments come in, our normal process would have been to just address those comments as part of our response to public comment and then move on to having a final report. In hearing from community members, I realize now that what we really need to do is, instead of providing answers in minutes related to what we, the county, have done related to the stripper slide valve, or trying to gather and piecemeal information and putting it all at the response to public comment, we need to share something with the community right now so that they have information and can make informed comments on this incident investigation report. And so it is for those reasons that I would like to bring a vote to the Oversight Committee to extend the public comment period. Before we do that, though, there is some information that I would like to share to everybody who is online at this meeting right now, and which will also be posted on our website, which relates to the work that Contra Costa Health Hazmat has done so far to address the questions that have come to us related to the stripper slide valve. So if everyone bears with me while I switch screens. I'm going to try and make this bigger, but this summary is going to be posted on our website. And what this is a review of everything that Contra Costa Health Hazardous Materials Program knows in relation to the stripper slide valve and the information that we have gathered. What we know is that MRC did overhaul and replace the slide valves during the 2018 turnaround. This overhaul process involved replacing internal components, resurfacing flanges, installing new packing and stems. And we know that the slide valves are scheduled to be either repaired to as new or replaced if necessary by PBF in MRC in 2025. Scott Berger has determined as part of his independent incident investigation that the slide valves were not related to the November 22 spent catalyst incident. There was, because of that, and because of the way that the investigation identified root causes and management system failures, Scott Berger's report did not determine a need to have an inspection of the slide valves at an accelerated time from the 2025 plan. The Hazardous Materials Hazmat program has taken the following measures to ensure that the slide valve was operating properly. Hazmat team has reviewed the operator shift rounds that are done on a daily basis and confirmed that MRC is collecting pressure readings from the slide valve actuators. Hazmat has interviewed subject matter experts from PBF and confirmed that the valves are also subject to conditional monitoring. This monitoring is aimed at detecting if there is any signs of potential early wear on the slide valve. The approach involves periodic inspections that could prompt corrective maintenance on the valve if necessary. These items were reviewed as part of the triannual audit that Contra Costa Health Services Hazmat program does through their engineering team. And then Hazmat has reviewed photos taken by MRC of the slide valves with their before and after condition from the 2018 turnaround inspection. And we have verified that the after pictures did show that the valve was repaired to an as-new condition. The Hazmat program at this point in time does not have the regulatory authority to compel MRC or PBF to re-inspect the stripper slide valve any earlier than their current plan. We have reviewed the standards that are currently existing and all of our regulatory authority to make that determination. And on April 30th of this year, Hazmat did notify MRC that we would not be asking them to re-inspect the valves outside of their current plan. I want to take the opportunity now to let MRC also speak on this, as I know that they have also posted something on their website related to the fluid catalytic cracker slide valve. So Ken, I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen now to what PBF has posted, if you'd like to speak to that as well.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and actually I had a website address for accessing this at what we're presenting as well. I'll see if I can get that up. I had that on my version of this, but I'll just read through this one.
I can drop all three websites, so the resources website, this direct page, and my page into the chat, Ken, while you're speaking.
Okay, very good. All right, so the slide valves are integral to operation of the cat cracker, and the factors are not the only ones in safe running of a cat cracker, but amongst the others, maintaining the proper differential pressure between the reactor and regenerator, for example, is a significant one. There's also instrumentation, operating procedures, shutdown systems, automated shutdown systems, and training that go into safely running a cat cracker. But the slide valves are part of that portfolio. I think the consensus in AFPM is emerging that probably the most important of them is managing the pressure between vessels. The three slide valves, I should mention what they are. So there's a reactor slide valve, the stripper slide valve, and the regenerator slide valve. Similar technologies for the slide valves. They're just in different parts of the catalyst flow within the cat cracker. They are inspected consistent with industry standards. In fact, next item. So during the last 3 turnarounds, we've actually had them inspected and repaired to as new condition, and that entails removing them from the process and shipping them off to Channelview, Texas, where the manufacturer goes through that process. And so we receive from them evaluations of the as found condition, and then reports and a certification finally that the rebuild is up to the performance standards for those slide valves. Repairs are conducted, like I said, by the original equipment manufacturer. We actually also send an MRC employee to Channelview to oversee that work and sign off on that. The slide valves were repaired to as new condition during 2018 and the 2 occasions prior to that as well. In addition, so the noted tests in 2020 and 2022 were opportunities where we were able to close the slide valves and ascertain that they held pressure across them. So when the disc or gate is closed, if you did have significant erosion of the gate, you would not be able to retain pressure on opposite sides of the gate. In fact, we found in 2020 and 2022 that we were able to retain pressure. Use the condition and repair history to determine how long the valves can be in service. I would point out that our slide valves are refractory lined. Refractory is chosen to be both heat resistant and erosion resistant. It is not the rate determining piece of information in the timing of turnaround. So for example, there are other pieces of equipment that would necessitate turnaround before the slide valves would. We do use infrared imaging or thermography to look at the refractory. So there's refractory both on the gate or disc and on other parts of the valve. We shoot with infrared. You can see if there was erosion of the refractory material, you would see a hot spot appear. That was done most recently 1 or 2 weeks ago, and we did not see hot spots, and those are the valves that have been installed since 2018. So in addition to the infrared thermography, there are daily checks that we do on the slide valve. So one of the things we do, for example, is we'll go out and we'll actually measure the pressure on the actuator. So if we were unable to position or move the valve, we would either see, like for example, if the valve was stuck, we would see a very, very high pressure without the valve moving. And that would indicate that we're unable to position the valve. Those are tests that we do actually once per shift. So those are done twice a day. And then final remark, the valves are scheduled. So that'll be first quarter 2025. The cat cracker is expected to go into turnaround. And at that time, as in previous occasions, the 3 slide valves will be removed from service. They will be inspected, sent off to Channelview for rebuild.
All right, thank you, Ken. So again, just to reiterate, we wanted to share this information that of the work that Contra Costa Health has done in one central location to kind of help address questions, because we were hearing a lot of comments around the incident investigation report and concerns that there was gaps in things that were evaluated, and we wanted to be able to have everyone comment to the fullest of their ability with this information. So with that being said, I want to come over back to the Oversight Committee and put to a vote as to whether or not we extend the public comment period on this incident investigation report by 2 weeks. And so I'm just going to go down my list. I will ask members of the Oversight Committee to say yes if you are in favor of extending the period, or no if you would not like to extend the comment period. So I'm going to start with Kent.
Yes.
Okay. Next, Stephen.
Yes.
Okay. Ben.
Yes.
Deirdre.
Yes.
Okay. Ken.
Yes.
Okay. Nick.
Yes.
Okay. And Tony Semenza was having internet connection issues, but I do have his vote via text that he said that he would like to extend the time of the public comment period so that the public can review the results of this new information. So for the members of the Oversight Committee who were present today, which is a majority, the vote is yes, we will be extending the public comment period. All of our information will be updated to reflect the new date, so that will be changing from May 20th to June 3rd. Thank you, everybody, for allowing us the opportunity to share that information and to take the vote. Next on our agenda, we have our public comment period. So as a reminder, every member of the public will have 2 minutes to make a public comment at the meeting today. So if you would like to speak, please go ahead and raise your hand, and I will start calling on people in the order that I can see them on my screen. So any member of the public who'd like to make a comment? Alicia, and we're going to go ahead and allow you to speak, and your 2 minutes will start.
Hi, thank you. My name is Alicia from Healthy Martinez. I have a few questions about this survey, and I hope they can be answered now. I'm not sure if that's possible. One question I had was, were the survey takers asked to reflect on that moment in time, or the past month, or the past year, or their entire time working there? I ask because there's a large allowance in the report for these responses to be linked to COVID-19, but there's no mention of the fact that this was conducted during and immediately after the catalyst release, this major accident and notification failure. So I'm not sure why we're giving COVID so much allowance in terms of the results of this survey that was done during a time when a lot of the restrictions had ended. So that's unclear to me of why that is. The other thing is it is definitely unacceptable that these findings were shared with the company prior to this oversight committee. I'm also very confused why we are only looking at those 7+ scores, especially after this major chemical release, this major accident that garnered so much public attention. I hope that we will see the results of the survey in full.
There's 15 seconds.
And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Alicia, I appreciate your comments. Just as a reminder of how our process goes, we typically will only respond to Oversight Committee comments at this point in time. And Scott is not here to speak to any of these items. But everything that I've heard you say, I have heard members of the Oversight Committee also bring up. So these will be addressed in written form and answered before the public version for public comment is made. So I just wanted to provide some clarification there. Next, I see Heidi Taylor.
All right, Heidi, you should be able to come off mute, and I'll start your timer now.
Thank you so much. Nicole, thank you again for extending public comment. I appreciate that. I'm wondering, though, if we are going to get any photographic evidence of the slide valve. I'd like to see that. I mean, we saw all kinds of great pictures from the Chemical Safety Board with regard to Marathon, and I think that that's warranted here. I want to also thank Nick with the USW. His comments were so on point and understandable, and I share all of his concerns, including what Alicia just said, which is that this report being shared with MRC PBF beforehand is just not appropriate. The other comment I want to make is that, I can understand some pretty complicated issues, but I don't think Scott or Kenan, I don't think that you guys have prepared this in a way that is understandable to a general audience. The key here is to assure us, the community, that we are safe. And when I have to, guess at what lagging versus leading indicator means, or best in class for management systems for pressure equipment integrity and interlocks. I don't have that kind of skill or training. You have failed to communicate to us. And that's huge. You should be using examples. I don't know what the questions exactly asked. I don't know how all of these employees at MRC feel, really.
15 seconds.
You missed an opportunity here, bottom line.
All right, thank you, Heidi. And Heidi, to address your question related to the pictures, we have conveyed that community request because we have heard this in various venues to MRC. I see Maureen has her hand raised. Maureen, go ahead. We'll promote you for.
Hi, thanks. This is really interesting report, and we all agree safety culture is important, but mechanical integrity matters, and we still don't know what mechanically went wrong. I'm fascinated by some of the language I'm hearing. Scott's reports described the highest leverage opportunities. That was interesting. He said gaps in preventative maintenance. I've worked in laboratory science for 50 years. Preventative maintenance is everything to keep your operations running and your machines. And what was a great concern is significant number of workers felt negative consequences of using stop work authority. That was stuck out in my brain. And also some of the language fascinating. Material deviation of procedure. Oh, and I put ... screw up. The language is quite interesting, but I'm happy to hear that the ISO audit will be done again, repeated in August 2024. Did I hear that right? I hope. But the one other thing is about the stripper valves. I mean, he said very specifically in your last slide that there were gaps in maintenance. And 2018, they replaced the stripper valves. They were replaced as new condition. Well, I've been told that these stripper valves last 5 years, maybe a little bit more, but and the next replacement is 2025. I'm very concerned, and I don't like this wait till they break kind of attitude. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Maureen. And I did want to clarify, the triennial audit took place between January and April of 2024. The audit, I believe that was being referred to, is not one done by Contra Costa Health hazardous materials programs. However, we will be working on getting our audit report posted out for public comment later this year. And I was out for the beginning part of the meeting, so maybe Michael or Kenan can clarify the August 2024 date and what audit that refers to, but Contra Costa Health will not be doing another triennial audit in August of 2024 of MRC.
Yeah, I don't recall an August 24 date being mentioned. I do recall the MRC identified that they were going to be doing a turnaround on the fluid catalytic cracker in the first quarter of 2025. And that's when they would be looking at the slide valves at that time. But yeah, we've completed our audit inspection of the facility.
Yeah, Kenan, do you have information to share? I know part of your results did talk about audits. So I don't know if I missed something.
Yeah, the audits was actually follow up more quickly on some of the audit findings from previous audits, not to conduct a new audit. The one assessment timing was about the timing for redoing the cultural assessment.
Understood. And then just to clarify for everybody here, when you say audits, are you referring to the internal compliance audits that MRC conducts on their own? And not ones done by Contra Costa Health?
Who are you asking that question? Are you asking me that question?
Yeah.
So when you look at the audit findings, there was a variety of them, but they were internal or ones that were initiated by them.
Okay, so ones that were initiated or done by MRC, and we're not referring to Contra Costa Health.
That's
audits.
correct.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, are there any more community members who wish to make a public comment? Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. We will be working on addressing the comments of the Oversight Committee and adjusting our public comment period and getting information out. I did drop into the chat 3 separate websites. One is an overall resources page for MRC where you can find their document on slide valves. One is a direct link to the slide valve document that MRC has posted online. And the third one is Contra Costa Health summary of information. Alicia, I do see that your hand is raised. However, we allow everyone 2 minutes, and so we don't have secondary comments. But if there is something that you need to have clarified, feel free to reach out to me via email. All right, if there's no one else who would like to comment, again, please visit our website, www.cchealth.org/hazmat/MRC to keep apprised of all things that happen related to the Oversight Committee. And if you are not already on our email blast list, I also encourage everyone to go visit the website that I just stated and sign up for our email blast. It is a very good way for you to stay apprised to everything that we have going on related to the MRC Oversight Committee. Thank you all for your time. Oh, sorry, Ben, go ahead.
Hey, the public can't see the link. Is that intentional?
Oh, they cannot? Okay. I've just been informed that you cannot see the links that I am sharing. I will ensure that all of those links are on our meeting minutes, and our meeting minutes will be posted shortly. I would say no later than Monday. And I think before we end, I think I found a way for the links to come up for everyone. Are the links up for everybody now? If someone in the audience could just raise their hand to say that they see the links. Thank you, Alicia. All right. So I will stay on for just a couple more minutes to give everybody opportunity to copy and paste those, and then we will end the meeting. Thank you again, everyone on the Oversight Committee, for all of your work on this, and we will continue to move forward and take all of the reports that we're still working on to their next steps. I appreciate all of you. Thank you.